Okay, so I just started the recording and I'll be going over a really quick slideshow, doing a brief introduction of Stephanie, who is our speaker today, and a little bit about the Helix Initiative. So let me share my screen. So once again, welcome everyone to the From Science to Action webinar with Stephanie, hosted by the Helix Initiative. So a little bit about Helix. Helix is the world's largest youth research community with over 3,000 members now, and members can participate in STEM leadership, research, volunteering, and competition opportunities for free. And we also do have volunteer hours available. And make sure to join us on Discord via helixscience.org, and you can also find more information about us there. And make sure to sign up for the other science nights. We will be hosting science nights every week, so make sure to sign up there, and I'll also paste the link in chat later. And now it's time to meet our amazing speaker, Stephanie Wang. So Stephanie is from Texas, and she's extremely passionate about leveraging science and technology to address inadequacies in education and public health. Stephanie is also an RSI scholar where she is researching anti-aging associated interventions at Harvard Medical School. And she's also a Science Olympiad national champion, among other great achievements. So without further ado, we can go ahead and let Stephanie introduce herself and take the spotlight.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for inviting me today. I'm really glad that I get the chance to talk to some amazing people through Helix. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Is it okay if you give me that option real quick?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. All right, so as Sarah already alluded to, the talk today is called From Science to Action, where I just give you some tips on how you can leverage your science knowledge and turn that into something that would meaningfully impact your community and just to the scientific community at large. So here's like what we're going to be talking about today. A little bit about me, about learning science, innovation, advocacy, impact, and then I'll open it up to questions. So first, who am I? So I'm a rising senior at Seven Lakes High School in Katy, Texas. It's right next to Houston, if any of y'all have visited there. I love biology, math, and public policy. And my most passionate thing to do is to just figure out how we can use science to help improve the way that to improve the way that technology works in the world and to help make lives better in any aspect of life. So just a bit about me, Sarah already went through it, but currently I'm interning at Harvard Medical School through Research Science Institute to study how various aging associated drugs can target various pathways in aging to help reduce, to help reverse or at least diminish the effect of aging on elderly populations. And I've also done a lot of competitions in biology and in math, as well as some research studies as well. And beyond just science, I'm also pretty involved in social advocacy and public policy. Most importantly, it's through my organization, or it's more of a campaign called Project Unmasked to help promote public health education among young students and among the population at large. Oh, sorry. Okay, so my bad. Okay, so this was a quote that I really wanted to share that I think really illuminates or encompasses most of the message of the talk, which is science knows no country because knowledge belongs to humanity and is the torch which illuminates the world, by Louis Pasteur. And what I really take away from this quote is that science is not something that you want to learn for yourself. It's something that you want to use to give back to the communities. So I really like to draw out the optimal scientific journey, which step one is just to learn. And then step two is to actually try out innovations. Step three is to do advocacy work, just to help inform the general population. And then step four is to actually improve your community that you're a part of. So Part one was to learn, and that involves to read, to tinker, and to question. And we'll talk a little bit about what that entails. So how do we optimally learn science? In my opinion, the best way to learn science is to read books. Textbooks are great, but just other books as well, written by various scientists, commentary, online blogs that are like ebooks or something, those also work as well. And the reason why I think books are so important to help you learn science in the best way possible is because they just contain so much information that's so organized, but also like so accessible. So they usually have a pretty generous, like a pretty accessible learning curve where you will get better as you read along. And just being able to consume the vast amounts of knowledge that are present in various textbooks is probably the best way to get familiar with certain fields of science or strengthen your knowledge in certain fields of science that you're already familiar with. So I would say reading books is the biggest suggestion that I have. And then the second one is to talk to fellow scientists. By this, I mean like collaborating on notes, holding meetings, and sharing interesting ideas. This way you can learn from each other and be able to reinforce your own knowledge by explaining things to other people. And then the other one is to compete. This one is a little bit, it kind of varies from person to person, but for me, I found that competing was a great way for me to get motivated, because sometimes if you're just learning for fun, sometimes you may get unmotivated if you're like if you become busy. So I think being able to compete and having that external motivation factor out there to influence you to truly put your heart and soul into something, that really helps you learn a lot better as well. So yeah, here's just some books that I wanted to recommend to you to read that are related to various fields of science. Of course, I'm not like, obviously I'm not like an expert in any of these, but these were just books that helped me a lot when I was learning. So yeah, like for biology especially, I would say Campbell's Biology is the best one that I've ever encountered, because it's so broad, but it goes really in detail in each one of those subjects that it talks about. And the specialty books are if you really want a challenge and just want to learn much more in detail about what, for example, goes on in plant physiology, genetics, etc. And then chemistry, I'm not as good as chemistry than biology, but these were just some of the books that I thought helped me a lot. And math, I would say the AOPS series of books are probably the best that I've encountered. So yeah, if you have any questions or want any book recommendations, feel free to reach out. I'll show you like my contact info at the end. Yeah, and so like the second thing that I talked about was to talk to fellow scientists. So the first thing is to join clubs, which is usually a great way to get to know other people who are interested in science. The club that I joined that had the greatest impact on my life was Science Olympiad. There are other great clubs I know, like Science Bowl or like Science National Honor Society, things like that, where you get to meet other people who have different passions in science. But yeah, and then there's join programs. These are a little different than clubs because a lot of them require applications. But if you get in, you are immersed into like an amazing community with some of the most ambitious people, and you really get to work together and allow yourself to grow exponentially in your knowledge of science. And host meetings. Yeah, I would say this is also like another great way to be proactive in learning science, where if you host meetings with other scientists, you can talk with each other and remind each other about like different interesting things that are going on in the field, or different parts of a textbook that you really want to read, and just hold each other accountable and be able to share ideas off of each other. Okay, yeah, so here are just some of my like general STEM competitions that I would recommend, because like if you are paying, like if you just followed, I did the books first, and then I did the talking to other scientists, and then I did the STEM competitions. And so for STEM competitions, these are some of the more popular STEM competitions. So for math, the most popular is the AMC series, and then there's obviously Scioli, which is one of my favorite competitions to compete in. And then there's the Olympiads, which are like the specialized competitions in each field. So for example, there's USABO for biology, USICO for computer science, USNCO for chemistry, USAFO for physics, USAMO for math, etc. So these are generally much harder than other competitions, but I think they're really worth it and they really push you to study a lot. And then Science Bowl, I'm not too familiar with Science Bowl, but I know a lot of my friends really like it too because it's a very fun and interactive way to compete with one another. So I would also say that like if your school has like a science Olympiad, I would highly suggest that you join because it really was the spark that got me interested in studying science at a deeper level. Okay, so now we're on to the second main step in the list of 4 things that I had in the beginning in the scientific journey, which was to innovate. And in this part, I really just want to talk about research because I think sometimes we forget how important it is for scientists to do research. And sometimes we may get caught up too much in the competition aspect of it that we forget that we really want to also contribute to the knowledge base that is already established in the scientific community. So yeah, this is where we begin the process from science to action. So in the first step, we were learning science, but now we really want to translate that knowledge into something that is new and something that hasn't been done before. So research is a great way to do that. Oh, before I continue, I just wanted to say that if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A. I should have said that earlier, but now that you know. So yeah, what is research is when you contribute to the cutting edge of scientific knowledge. So what that means is like you are not just learning, you're actually taking the information that you synthesize together to draw new conclusions from the existing science and find out, for example, new pathways, such as a new cancer pathway, creating a new algorithm for data compression, like if you're into computer science, or creating a new device for heart monitoring. These examples show that you're not just simply learning, you're actually creating something and creating something that's never been done before, or identifying something that's never been done before, or discovering something that's never been done before. So the basic idea behind this is that you are using your scientific knowledge to take action by building up existing technology. So for example, like research papers. Research papers have identified something new from the existing literature. So they've either run an experiment and found something new, or they've synthesized or they've analyzed data and determined something very interesting from that data. And they just want to share it with the rest of the world. So this is like something that's very unique. And I think there's a stigma behind research that it's like extremely hard. Well, it is hard. I'm not going to deny that. But I think it's much more accessible than some people may think. So there are definitely many ways to get involved in research when you're young. I think even starting in middle school if you're really interested. So I didn't start until high school, but I know like some people start very early and they get like a very great edge like later on in high school and even in college. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about how you can start doing research. So first, obviously, got to identify the field of interest. So if you're a biology person, then optimally you would do research in biology and so on. So then you would probably try to figure out like, does my research or does the question that I want to investigate involve a lab? And so if so, reach out to labs near you, such as, since I live in Houston, maybe I could reach out to like the University of Houston or other local colleges as well. And then if you don't need a lab, then the research is actually easier. So you can reach out to mentors, or if you don't want to, you can do it yourself, but I would recommend having a mentor in your field of interest. So this way you could actually like learn how to do like data analysis, read a lot of papers, and be able to just do stuff at home without the requirement of a lab. So yeah, these are just some ways that you can actually find research opportunities. I would say the easiest, like the most straightforward way, I wouldn't say easiest, but the most straightforward way to do so is to apply for research programs. And there are actually quite a few, but a lot of them are only open to high school students and specifically only open to rising high school seniors. So for example, RSI is only open to rising high school seniors. SSP, I believe, is open to sophomores and juniors. So rising juniors and rising seniors. So these are like some of the most prestigious ones out there. And then there's also Clark, rising senior, Simon's also rising senior. So these are like some of the programs that will just automatically give you a mentor and give you like a project that you could work on over the summer. So you don't really have to do your own outreach. You just have to get in. But the ones that I listed in part A are like extremely selective. So for example, RSI has an acceptance rate of about 3%, or I think maybe less, I'm not too sure, but these are extremely selective programs. So it's usually like to get in, they usually are looking for maybe a candidate who perhaps has done research in the past. So to do research, like to start off, you could apply for like some moderately selective programs like Rockefeller, Welch, which is only in Texas, Garcia, and there's some other ones. I think if you just Google, you'll find a list. And then there's some other ones that are more local, such as internships in your local communities, like your local colleges, internships at like your state college, things like that. I feel like you could definitely find some if you look hard enough. So that's like one way to do it, which is the more straightforward way, or you could do your own outreach. So you could find local labs or find local professors and then draft like a concise email template. I think the email template is really important and sometimes it gets understated. So you have to have like a good intro, like a catchy intro, maybe not like the type where you write in essays, but I'm just saying something that is not super boring. And then talk about your field of interest, why their lab or why their work appeals to you if you don't need a lab. And then ask if they could potentially help you out with a project, and then attach your resume if you have one. So that's like pretty much the template for emails. But I would just like warn you that like the response rate is pretty low, especially if you haven't really done research in the past. But I would just say like don't give up. That's like my main advice for that. And follow up to get an internship if you're lucky. So sometimes professors would like to get on a call with you, or they would like to just chat with you like through email, ask a little bit more about your interests and your previous work. And that could definitely help you like get that internship that you really want. And I would just say like try to convey a lot of interest in whatever they're doing. So, and don't just like email people that in fields that don't interest you. So for example, if you're interested in like biochemistry, maybe don't email someone who is like a physics professor. So just be cognizant of that. And sometimes you'll be able to get an internship, which I think is really great because this is open to anyone. You don't actually have to apply. You can, as long as you have interest, you have a good chance of getting it. So yeah, by the way, like let me know if there are any questions about this. I remember doing it at first and it was pretty confusing. So I totally understand and I would love to help in any way that I can. So yeah, after you do your research, there's several different ways that you can go about presenting it to others. So one very common way is science fairs. I personally didn't really do any science fairs, but a lot of people have, a lot of my friends have as well. So there's like the regional science fair, there's the state fair, and then there's like ISEF. There are also some other like pretty major ones like the Google Science Fair. So these are like some of the most popular ways to go about presenting your research. So these are where you like actually present your research to like judges, and they'll ask you questions, and then like the best project or whatever wins. So you're like competing against other people. Another really common way is to present at a conference. So I have done this before, and like there are definitely different conferences that are available on like any subject that you can think of. So for example, there's the International Conference on Public Health. There's the pretty common like youth one called the Johns Hopkins University Global Health Conference. And there's several others where if you present your research at a conference, the most valuable thing that you can get, or perhaps one of the most valuable things that you can get, is a community of people and a community of scientists willing to critique your work and tell you like maybe you should work on this in the future, and tell you what you did well, and maybe like form relationships with people that you can collaborate with in the future. And then other science related research contests, I kind of already talked about this a little bit, but like some other science fairs, I guess, are like Toshiba, Google Science Fair, and Regeneron STS. But Regeneron STS is only open to seniors, so that's like that. Another way that you can go about doing this is to submit it to a journal. However, this is pretty hard, especially if the journal is like tough. So there are some journals out there that are less prestigious, and then there are some that are extremely prestigious. So there's something called an impact factor to a journal that basically is like a measurement of how frequently the articles in that journal are cited by other journals. So high impact factor means the articles in there are cited very frequently, and that makes the journal extremely prestigious because they only publish good research. So for example, journals like Nature are extremely prestigious. Their impact factor is like 40 something, and it's like extremely hard to get it published in there. But then there are like some less prestigious journals that do not have as high of an impact factor and could be a good consideration if you're interested in submitting. But I would say that submitting to a journal and actually getting published in a journal is pretty hard. So yeah, but it's definitely not impossible though. So now we're moving on to the third step, which is to advocate. By the way, like as I mentioned earlier, if you need any help or would like any more guidance on the research process, I would love to help you out with anything if I can like help at all. So part 3 is to advocate, and by that I mean to communicate, mobilize, and to enact. And you'll see exactly what I mean by that later. And just to say, advocating is also another part of the from science to action, where you're actually turning whatever science knowledge you know to affect a greater amount of people in the community through advocacy work. And I think I got a question here. How do you choose a good research topic? Okay, that's actually a great question. So I would actually say that this is kind of an underestimated question, actually. Choosing a good research topic will oftentimes make or break your research project. So I would say that when you're choosing a research topic, I would try to recommend like actually talking with someone who is an expert in the field. So that's why I think having a good mentor is very important. Having someone who is like who's done research in that topic and knows exactly what he or she is doing and has like a good project idea, that could really help you a lot. But if you are just like experimenting around and just like trying to figure things out, sometimes you definitely can get a good research topic, but I would say it is a lot harder. And just as a rule of thumb, I would say trying to find patterns, trying to make new conclusions, those are oftentimes promising. But also I would say like trying to, but I would say like there are different fields that make better research. So for example, or better research topics or more promising research topics. So for example, pure math is sometimes pretty hard to come up with a good research topic if you don't really know like detailed into a specific field. So for pure math, I would say definitely talk to a mentor. But for biology, you could definitely just read papers and see, is there like a chunk of this paper, or is there like a field in this paper that is actually missing? Or is there like a conclusion that they said they would like to do further analysis on? Maybe that's something you could expand on further. So just taking a look at papers, reading through the existing literature, that's extremely important. And I would say a lot of the times, the research topic will refine as you're actually working. So for example, for my RSI research project, at first I didn't really know like what I was going to do. I knew there was this drug and there were like several diseases that it could be implicated in, but I really wasn't really sure like how it could be implicated in those diseases. So I just tried to look at more data for the drug and the diseases and try to find similarities. And later on, that actually gave me a pretty good research topic, like a pretty succinct research question to answer. So hopefully that could answer your question a little bit. And someone just asked, is it recommended that students should affiliate their research at a university for more credibility? I'm not really too sure about this. I don't really know, but I would say that as long as your research is meaningful and as long as it like adds to the existing knowledge in the scientific community, I would say as long as like it does that, I would say your research is set on a good path, because I don't think necessarily people will be caring too much about like which college you did it at or like who your mentor was, as long as you have like good results and have like legitimate research that could actually contribute well. So hopefully that also helps. So I got a few questions in the chat. Is it possible to excel in both science research competitions and science Olympiads? If so, how? That's definitely possible. A lot of my friends at RSI are actually do both. So for example, some of them have published papers and also are like USIMO qualifiers, things like that. So definitely it's possible. And I would say it's not the best idea to try to separate them off into rigid clusters of like they're not the same, because they definitely do have overlap. Because if you already have that good background information established through Science Olympiad, you can definitely have an easier time doing research. So you'll definitely be able to know that information better and formulate a better research question, use better tools to do your research, and that could definitely help you. And that knowledge could translate over to your research. So it definitely is related. Will you share the recording or the slides? Yeah, I believe we will. Okay, yeah. So yeah, keep the questions rolling in if you have any more questions, but I'm just gonna go ahead and move on. If you have any questions about anything I said earlier, just let me know in the Q&A. Okay, so I just wanted to make like a quick distinction between innovation versus advocacy. So innovation is research and experimentation, where you are diving into a narrow field of science and trying to answer a question that was not answered before. So whereas advocacy is where you're trying to communicate the knowledge that you know to the general public. So if you look over here to the arrows, research is narrow. You're using cutting edge technology in the field. So for example, you are trying to figure out like, is this pathway related to cancer? Questions like those, super narrow, but they can yield promising results. Whereas broad advocacy work is when you're just trying to communicate science knowledge to other people who may not be very familiar with it. So for example, policymaking is one example, creating opportunities for other people through like nonprofits or through like curricula or classes and things like that. That could also be a great way to communicate your science. Okay, I think I got another question. Do you have any tips for writing a scientific article? So I think my number one tip is to be concise. I know a lot of scientific articles, if you're not super like, if you're not don't have too much background in that field, it can sound like jargony, but I would say like staying away from the jargon is the most important tip. And this is not just advice from me. This is what my tutor at RSI and all my previous mentors have said as well. So just being concise, trying to say as much in as few words as possible and not rambling. I would say rambling is like a pretty bad thing, especially in scientific papers. But yeah, like just making sure that you're getting your point across without talking too much, without being too verbose. So yeah, that would be like a main tip that I have. Do you have to do science fairs to get into RSI? No, you don't. I didn't do any science fairs at all, like throughout my high school. So yeah, so hopefully that marks a good distinction between innovation versus advocacy. Oh yeah, so now I just wanted to talk a little bit about my advocacy journey, just what I've been doing. Maybe it could help you out, maybe if you have an idea. So yeah, so first, my advocacy is really based in public health. So I've been involved in public health, learning epidemiology from 7th grade because I was involved in Science Olympiad. And so from there on, I was really interested in trying to communicate that to the general public, especially during COVID. So during COVID, you probably noticed like a lot of new terms that popped up, such as like reproductive ratio or herd immunity or like transmission and things like that. So a lot of what I noticed was a lot of my friends and family were kind of confused by those words. And another thing I would see is that like online, there would be a lot of misinformation. So I really wanted to help educate the people who are confused and diminish the spread of misinformation. And thirdly, to promote personal health responsibility. So make sure that everyone is placing their health as a top priority, especially during a vulnerable public health time like COVID-19. So those were like the three main reasons for writing my book. But I think writing the book is like what is only one part of the advocacy journey, because you don't want to stop anytime. You always want to keep going because there's never an end to like trying to spread knowledge. I think I just got another question. How would you find mentors for your research? So for this one, I talked about it in the slide previously, like where I talked about reaching out, such as applying to programs or reaching out to colleges. So I'm just going to continue moving forward with this part, but if we have time at the end, I'll definitely go back to that slide and just reiterate some of the things I said. Okay, so after writing the book, okay, yeah, so then I started Project Unmasked, which is a movement or a campaign to promote public health education and public health literacy to students and to adults, honestly. Not really a distinction, but some of the things that we've been fortunate enough to do is to change the biology curriculum at my school. So previously they didn't have any public health or epidemiology stuff in there. So what I did was I talked to several teachers and they were able to integrate some of that into their curriculum. And then presenting the curriculum to the district and presenting it to the International Conference on Public Health, which will be in August, and then speak to various people who are in charge of educational policy. So like State Board of Education members, school board members, state representatives, senators, congressional representatives, etc. So these are the people who are in charge of actually crafting educational policy. So if Project Unmasked is able to get our message across to these people, then they have the greatest authority to make that positive change for students. And then launched an advocacy program for youth that's still ongoing. So if you're interested, just go to projectunmasked.org and then go to the Take Action tab and all the information is there. So yeah, but yeah, one thing if you'll notice is the theme of changing science into action. So public health is obviously a field of science. Epidemiology is also a field of science, but they're only fields of science. But you have to really go for changing that science into something that would benefit the community or something that would create a positive change in students' education and things like that. So this is just one example. Of course, it's just my example. There's several different examples of people changing science into advocacy. So one, obviously, another great example is the Helix Initiative itself. Being able to transform that science knowledge. I believe it started like just that interest in biology and bioinformatics and being able to communicate it to thousands of students across the country and across the world. That's definitely another example of advocacy, of changing science into action. Okay, so, oh, did I skip a slide? Yes, I did. So what can you do? Oh wait, whoops, I accidentally skipped another slide. Yeah, so I would just say like, how do I start? A lot of y'all are probably asking, how do I start something that would be a successful advocacy project? So what I did for Project Unmasked was I first sought out some grants to actually help fund my project because I knew there would be a lot of expenses that would go on in making a national campaign. So I actually got grants from Peace First and America's Promise. And if you're interested, I would definitely recommend applying to both of them. And then also like you have to have a very clear mission. So you have to have like a mission statement or like a paragraph or whatever that explains very clearly what you want to do. So our mission is to spread public health literacy through education. And then you also have to figure out what you really want to do with this advocacy project. Do you want to like teach classes to students? Do you want to like provide food to areas riddled by food insecurity? Do you want to like help underprivileged students in like schools? So you have to have like something that you really want to do. So for us, it was curricular and legislative change. So changing the curriculum and changing the education standards. So that's what we really want to do. Okay, I got 2 questions in the chat. So let's see. Did you do any specific Olympiads? I actually did. I did USABO, so biology Olympiad, and I also did the math Olympiads. So I did like AMY and some other math competitions. Are there opportunities to write papers on non-STEM concepts? Oh yeah, for sure. So we can talk about that like later because there are definitely opportunities to do that as well. Okay, so what advocacy can entail? Oh, whoops, I think I accidentally did this slide before that slide, but whatever. So y'all get the idea. So what can you do? This is a question that is like probably asked a lot, not just to me, obviously, but to like a lot of other people as well. So what can I do? If I want to start something, what can I do? So my first like biggest piece of advice is to start local. You have to start from somewhere, and starting from that somewhere means just starting in places that are closest to you with the people that you are most familiar with. So reach out to those you know about a cause you are passionate about. So this could be like maybe talking to your friends and asking if you're interested in starting like an organization, or talking to your teachers and seeing if they could potentially help teach a curriculum. That's what we basically did. Or that could be like talking to like, I don't know, like anyone, honestly, who could help you out with something. But starting local is key because you can't expand if you don't have like a starting point, and everyone starts somewhere. So that's like my biggest, well, not my biggest, I would say like one of the biggest pieces of advice. And then I don't know why it keeps doing that. Okay, 2 is to get media recognition. This is pretty important, and I think sometimes people underestimate how much media can influence people. So, for example, like for my book, I didn't really have any sales at first, but once I was covered by like a local magazine and a local newspaper, that definitely drove up the sales a lot. So media is like the way that people get their news, the way that people like learn about what's going on in their community. And so if you can really get media recognition, then you can really spread your message really far. So it's actually pretty hard to get media recognition, but some tips that I would say is that try to reach out to like individual journalists or try to reach out to local, like as the same thing, start local. Don't try to reach out to like the New York Times, okay? Reach out to like your local TV station or your local newspaper and see if they can help you out. So that would be a very great piece of like great tip that you could follow if you really want media recognition. I think I got another question in the chat. Let me check. How long did it take to write your book? For me, I started in March and I published it in June. So about like 4 months. Okay, so reach out to people in charge. This is also pretty important because like depending on what your initiative really wants to do, people in charge, like people higher up, they could really help impact something and give you something that you really need. So for example, teachers can help talk to other teachers. Community leaders could talk to like could have like a larger platform to share your message. Adults could talk to like other adults who could potentially give you like funding or media opportunities or other opportunities to like spread your message. Larger organizations could also help because larger organizations have a much bigger platform. And if you tap into that platform, then they can help expose you to their entire platform. And there will be some people in their platform who are interested in your cause, and you would get more people who are on board with your idea. So that's definitely, these are like some examples of people that you could reach out to. And they could help a lot, just more than maybe your friends, sometimes more than your friends can. But yeah, I would say keeping this one in mind is also pretty important. And then communicate science to others. That's just like the general rule of thumb. Like if you really want to transform science into action, you have to like understand that you want the general populace to really be able to tap into that beauty of science. Because if you're here, I'm sure you love science, but not everyone does. And you really want people to really be able to get those opportunities to experience science the way that you have, or to experience science in a way that is innovative and not like terribly boring, because science is not boring at all. You want everyone to be able to understand that message and be able to give them the opportunities to do so. So yeah, now I'm going to open it up to questions. That's about it for like the meat of my presentation. So I had a few questions in the chat and I'm going to go ahead and answer them. So one of the questions was, are there opportunities to write papers on non-STEM concepts? I said I would talk about this at the end, so here we are. So I actually work for this organization, this policy organization that, and I actually work in the publishing department. And it's like, basically what I do is I write articles about various public policy things and publish it on the website. So it's very different between writing a scientific article versus writing like a public policy article. The research can be similar, like you all have to, for both of them, you have to find previous literature in the field and then generate something new or provide a new viewpoint. But yeah, there are definitely opportunities to do so. So I would say it depends on what type of papers you want to write though. So if you're just interested in writing essays, there are definitely like writing camps out there or magazines that you could look into. If you're like more of a policy person like me, there are definitely various organizations. There are some for youth too, and you could reach out and see if you could like intern there, if you could write something for their magazine, etc. So that's definitely also an option. So to have media, so another question, so to have media coverage, you have to reach out to newspapers. I always thought they come to you. Well, in the very beginning, you would have to reach out, because if you don't know them, like if like no one knows about you yet, then obviously you have to be the one to do the outreach. But later on, there may be media that reach out to you. So it depends on like what stage you are in your outreach. If you just started and like the only people who know about your initiative are like your friends, then I would say, yeah, you would have to reach out on your own. But if like you're bigger, like your organization is more known, then you may have newspapers and outlets try to reach out to you. Okay, I have two questions in the Q&A. So can you explain the process on how we can reach out to universities to borrow a lab or receive mentorship on a research project? Okay, I'm getting a lot of questions on research. If you have much experience with, don't have much experience with research, would it be better to start off with emailing professors or should you apply for a camp? What is the difference between getting an internship with a professor and working with a professor on research? Okay, yeah, so let me just go back to the research slides. I think that would help. Whoops. Okay, so yeah, here was the main research slide. If you don't have much experience with research, would it be better to start off with emailing professors or should you apply for a camp? I would say it depends. It depends on if you have like opportunities near you. If you have an opportunity in a university near you that is like asking for students who may not necessarily have the background in research, I would say that's optimal. So for example, there's this one program called the AEOP research internships or apprenticeships or something, and they are pretty open to people who haven't done research in the past. So that's something that you might want to check out. And then there's also like, for example, I know where I live, there's like this program offered by Baylor Medical School to students who may not have done research in the past. So I would say look for those first. And if you find one, then apply and hope for the best. But also like if there aren't any near you, I would say emailing professors is also another way you can do it. But I would say don't even limit it to professors. You can find like a graduate student, or you can find like a PI or something in a lab who is more accessible, because professors are extremely busy people. So anyone who has experience working in the field could serve as a mentor for you since you're just starting off. So hopefully that helps. Okay, can you explain the process on how we can reach out to universities? Okay, yeah. So on the right here is like pretty much the main like template on what you should do. So first, find local labs, find like, like I guess professors or graduate students or PhDs who work in the field that you're interested in, and then reach out to them. And but also I would say cold email is not always the best strategy. I would say the best strategy is to ask your teachers or if your parents or anyone else that you know personally, and see if they have like friends or colleagues who work in a lab who you could potentially work with, because that way it's much easier for them to take you on as a student when they have a mutual connection. So that way is better than cold emailing. But if you don't have connections like that, that's totally fine. Most students don't. So if you don't, then cold emailing is also a good way, but just I would warn to like not be impatient with that. Okay, give me a second. Okay, what is the difference between getting an internship with a professor and working with a professor on research? Well, there's two types. There's a type where you kind of just like you act like as like a research assistant where you help them with the research project that you're doing. So usually this will be you join a group research project that they're already doing in their lab. So you would be helping with like the data analysis, but there's already an existing project. You're just helping out. And then there's also like the type where you're doing independent research. So for example, for me, like throughout the school year, I worked on a research project that about like cardiovascular physiology. And I was doing the research on my own. Like it was my own project idea and it was like my own project. And my mentor didn't have like a lab that was already working on it. So that would be like a self-guided research project that you're doing. And your mentor will just be helping you out like with questions, with different like suggestions that they have. So that's kind of like the difference. Internship is usually when you're working with that lab, and then working with a professor, oftentimes that entails you doing your own independent research. So hopefully that helps. Do you have any tips for finding professors to cold email and tips on cold emailing itself? So if you look at number 3 over here, here's like a concise email template that you could usually follow. So finding professors to cold email, as I said, like don't limit yourself to professors. It could be like graduate students or anyone else who's familiar with the field of research that you're interested in doing. Find their email, send them like a really kind email. I would say don't be pushy or needy. That's definitely a big turnoff. So I would say just express a lot of interest in their work. So for example, if you're interested in doing research in like bioengineering, and then there's a professor who's doing research in like engineering new like, I don't know, like heart valves or something, then you could talk about why you're so interested in their work and what got you interested in bioengineering. So if you convey that passion, it's much better than if you're just like, hey, I want research projects to do. So conveying that passion is extremely important. And okay, another huge tip that I have that I learned the hard way is to be very like short. Don't say too much. Don't give like a 5-paragraph essay in that email. Maybe like 2 or 3 paragraphs without maybe like 3 or 4 sentences per paragraph. So yeah, be concise, be short. Don't like go on a ramble or anything. And don't, oh, another thing is don't like list out all your awards in there as well. That could be a turn off too. I would say just if you want to list your awards, attach a resume. But don't talk too much about your awards in that like initial cold email. So yeah, those are like some of my main tips. Okay, are there any research programs available for freshmen? For freshmen, I think the AEOP one that I talked about is available for freshmen. But otherwise, I'm not too sure. There are definitely a few like for sophomores. I think there's one called the SIP or something. I'm not too sure. But if you just Google it, I'm sure there are some that will come out. Yeah. Let's see. The chat, where would you write? Oh, whoops, sorry. How did you go about creating a public health curriculum? How well was it received in your school after it was implemented? Okay. Okay. So what I did was I actually held a public health class right after I published my book, where I just taught like a lot of students public health. So I already had like the PowerPoints. And so what I did was I used the PowerPoints and the material to craft like a innovative project for students to do. And so afterwards, I just reached out to my like some teachers in my school and asked them if they were able to do it. But I would say like for that part, the most important thing I did was I explained the problem to them. Like I explained the misinformation epidemic that was going on. I explained how public health education could enhance students' critical thinking, and it could also help promote students like understanding of the greater societal issues. So that was like a great convincing aspect of public health education, and that's why they were like pretty happy to do it. And I know that it was like a good, like it was pretty well received because we actually had students fill out like a survey at the end, and we had some pretty great results. So for example, we had around like 80% of students or 86% of students saying that they were better motivated to take their health more seriously and things like that. So it was pretty good. And I would say that if you want any advice or if you need any tips or if you'd like to do something similar in your school, reach out to me and I would love to help. So yeah, let me actually go to the slide with my contact info if any of y'all are interested. It's at the very end. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so I got another question. Where would you write an advocacy paper? Are there any specific apps or platforms? So for this, I would say finding like different organizations that are specialized in like public policy. So one of the organizations that I work for is the Institute for Youth and Policy, and they have like an internship program for students. So that's like a good way you can get involved. And then there's also like different other advocacy programs out there. If you just Google it, I'm sure some will come out for you. So yeah, I would say starting off with like an organization is good because it gives you a platform to publish your work. Okay, and then let's look at the Q&A. I have like a few questions here. What did your journey in research look like? So I worked in a lab the summer before freshman year, and then I did some work the summer after sophomore year. But I continued that research throughout the entire year. So, and then that was like the main research experience that I had. And then in my junior year, I actually did a project that was like on my own. Like it was pretty independent. I had like a mentor, I guess, but he was just there to like answer questions. So those were like the main things that I did in research. And then of course, my biggest research project is right now, what I'm doing for RSI. So that's like basically what my experience has been. Okay, should we disregard fluffy sentences such as "I hope you are doing well" when emailing professors, or get straight to the point? Well, I would say definitely be polite. Don't want to like, you don't want to make it as if like they owe you something. I know you're not doing that, but I'm just like, a warning is that you always want to be really polite. And saying that "I hope you're doing well" is a good way to start that. So I wouldn't consider that super fluffy, but I would say like getting to the point in the meat of your email is a good idea. You don't want to ramble too much about like stuff. That's like not a good sign either. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Do you think citizen science is worth it, or is it better to focus more on practical opportunities? Well, I'm not really familiar with what citizen science is, so I'm not really sure if I can like answer that. But I can look into that some more if you want me to. So if you don't mind sharing, what made you think you stood out when you applied for the RSI program? Well, I definitely don't really know for sure, because like I don't really know how they do their admissions. But I mean, if I was to like put my finger on it, I would probably say that like me being involved in science from different aspects. So for example, I was involved in science in competitions. I was also involved in research and also involved in like advocacy. So all three of the main pillars that I shared with you today. So I think that was like something, maybe, I'm not too sure though, don't quote me, but that's what I think personally. When did you start research? So I started like in freshman year. That was, yeah. Do you sometimes feel unmotivated? If so, what do you do? That's an amazing question. And of course I do. Like, for example, like before, so like, okay, so for Science Olympiad, we have to study a lot. Like, it's the competition that I definitely study the most for. And if there's like a major competition coming up and I'm studying a lot, and then the day before the contest or a week before the contest, I'll just like crash and be like, I don't want to do this anymore. But yeah, I would say there are definitely times when I feel unmotivated. And if so, what do I do? So I would say the biggest suggestion that I have is to just give yourself time to cool down. So give yourself time to like really relax, do what you really want to do. Like, for example, if you like watching YouTube, or if you like taking walks or jogging, do whatever makes you comfortable and do whatever makes you relaxed. So that would be the biggest advice, because there's no point in trying to go forward when you're unmotivated. You're going to be extremely unproductive, and there's no point in doing that whatsoever under any circumstances. So yeah, just make sure that you're taking care of your mental health, that you're taking care of like your own body and making sure that everything is okay and that you're healthy mentally and physically, because if not, there's no point in trying to do like work, because you won't be productive at all. And it's better to have like, well, it might just be me, but in my opinion, it's better to have like long periods where you are very productive than it is to have like small distracted periods of time when you're studying. So that would be my suggestion. So if you feel unmotivated, give yourself some time to take a break, relax, do whatever you need to do to feel refreshed again. Okay, I think that was it for the questions. If there's any more questions, let me know. And then in the chat as well, I'm also checking that. Okay, just got another question. Could you explain how your experience at RSI was? So we're actually still in week 3, so we're not done yet. But basically the first week is all classes. So we take classes in 2 of the 4 major fields of science. So like there's biology, chemistry, math, and physics. So I took biology and chemistry. And then we also have like guest lecturers. And then for the most of the time though, we're working on a research project. And then on weekends, we have like fun activities. Yeah, it's been a great experience so far. And I would definitely recommend anyone who's interested to apply. Because I think the most important part of RSI is that you get a network of people who are extremely ambitious, extremely talented, and extremely helpful. So you have like friends who can help you on things that you may not be like completely familiar with. You have mentors who can help you, who are like extremely smart. So yeah, definitely do that. Can you submit RSI research to science fairs? Yeah, you can. Do you get to create your own research project for RSI? Well, I think it depends from person to person and from mentor to mentor. So for me, like I'm working on a project that my mentor like gave me a general path to do. So yeah, like I was given like some general advice on what to do, but I wasn't given like specific details on what to do it. So I had to like figure out, maybe this is the pathway I want to go, or maybe I shouldn't do that pathway. So I had to do some own experimenting with the data and with the own like with some of the previous literature. So I guess like maybe, but if your question means if the research is like independent, yeah, it is independent. Everyone does their own different research project. So yeah, that's if anyone else has any questions, feel free to ask them right now. And by the way, like if you have any other questions afterward, please let me know, because I would love to help you out in any way. And you can just shoot me an email or send me a message anywhere. So if there are no more questions, then I guess that ends my webinar for Helix. Again, thank you so much, Sarah, for inviting me on. It was a pleasure to talk with all of you guys. Oh wait, did I just get another?
There's another question.
Oh, well, oh, thank you so much. That's so sweet of you. Okay, actually, I just got another question. 2 more questions. Okay, what non-STEM extracurriculars do you do? My main non-STEM extracurricular is like my work in public policy. So for example, I'm currently interning at a policy foundation, and then I'm also on the youth leadership board of like this other battlefield organization, because I'm also like somewhat interested in history. So those are like my main non-STEM my main non-STEM extracurriculars. Is it possible to submit research projects to science fairs if they're completed in a structured program? Well, it would depend on what program you're doing, and sometimes it varies from program to program. And I know like some programs don't really let you do that, but other programs are more flexible. So you'd have to like ask your program manager or like read the rules of whatever program you're trying to apply to. But I think most of the time is yes, but I'm not too sure. So yeah, last call for any questions. Yeah. So if there aren't any questions, yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. Oh wait, did I just get another question? No, I didn't. Okay, thank you so much though. Y'all are so sweet. Thank you so much for everyone who came here. I'm really glad that you came to listen to me talk, and I'm glad I could help you in any way that I can. So as I said earlier, let me know if there are any questions in the future. I'm always available if any of y'all need help with anything. So yeah, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for talking today. We have such a pleasure to have you. I'm sure that we all learned a lot, and there are a lot of great questions, and you answered them really well. And now I feel super inspired to start doing some public science advocacy. So thank you. And yeah.
Of course, it was a pleasure. Thank you, Sarah.
So I will go ahead and stop the recording.